Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, so on and so forth. Hope everyone is doing okay. This morning's Dharma talk, the title. What did I tell you it was titled?
Depth of training.
Is that what I said? That's what I'll talk about then. Okay, the title is Depth of Training. And the idea there is to, and I'm kind of talking about the same thing all the time. I'm sure you've noticed that. I've even had some complaints about that. People get really bored sometimes. Want to be entertained by Dharma talks, kind of. So what this is about is to help us look at, observe, understand when I say train your mind, it's just a simple way of saying, just look at what is the quality of the thought patterns of the mind that operates in such an untrained or wild and crazy circular, like a scared rabbit, running around, running away from this, running towards that, just operating totally out of impulse or out of desire or hope or fear, or we're just completely controlled by the causes and conditions that we do not understand deeply. We have to understand it deeply. There are some people who are so wild and crazy that they believe their thoughts, they believe their opinions, they believe their ideas, because these protect that and insulate that which we call an ego or narcissism or self-centeredness, or from the point of view of this spiritual path, the false identity, the identity that is established and constructed and reinforced and driven, and you could say protected by ideas, opinions, beliefs. Well, you don't believe that, do you? No, I don't know. What do you think? What do you think about what I'm thinking? I don't know. What are you thinking? Well, I was thinking about what you were thinking about what I'm thinking. And I'm being crazy or silly. I'm being circular, but it's that's what we do that. Look closely the next time you have any kind of a conversation with anybody, especially with someone who has no mind training at all and is completely at the mercy of their conditioning. What do you call it? Their karma. They're at the mercy of it. To them, that looks like freedom. And they'll even call it that. Well, they're not going to take my freedom away. Yeah, I think Rinpoche wrote a book on that. It was called The Myth of Freedom. Did you notice he never addresses that through the whole book? You did notice that? Or did he? Did he? You guys are studying it. You should know. So when I say depth of training, what I'm endeavoring, when I was talking to Unyo this morning, and Junchu usually announces the title of the talk. I never know what I'm going to talk about particularly. So the idea here was what I'm thinking about, I would like to talk about is, would you go straighten that scroll? Thank you. Once the scroll is straight, then I'll be able to give this talk. Yes. If you don't see how it's crooked, then you won't be able to straighten it. Very good. Thank you. You might say, what's that about? He's a fussy guy. Not really. Not fussy. Not fussy at all. No position. That's the only way you can really take a position on anything, is to not, if you have a position ahead of time, this is called an illusion. So people are trained in different ways. We're trained how to paint a house, how to repair a bicycle, or how to change a tire on a car. These days, we wouldn't do that ourselves, probably, but maybe. All kinds of very materialistic ways of training. And then there are the more sophisticated ways of training, getting a degree in philosophy, or getting a degree in mathematics, or in counseling, or, we have examples of all kinds of different kinds of training where we learn how to do something, how to apply that ties into the society, into the culture, into the economy in such a way that we have some value there. And so we operate that way. What was the title again? Title of the talk?
Depth of training.
Yeah, okay, thanks. I might check in with you every now and then. Depth of training. So I'm talking about the surfacey. What do you need to finish this? How much do I need to? And there's all kinds of structures called universities, called trade schools, called third grade, called fourth grade. Fourth grade. You ever been through fourth grade? I mean, when you start multiplying stuff, that's a dangerous feeling for a 9-year-old. Where is this going to lead? Multiplication? Oh, apparently you guys didn't have the fear I had. So the fear of losing control can cause us to get a kind of training that helps us seem more secure. So what's being protected there? Why would we train? Well, we might train to make a living. Obviously, this is I'm not talking about a value judgment. I'm not talking about, say, deeper training is better. No, we need all kinds of training. We need training just in table manners if you're going to live in a society that we call civilized, although these days I'm wondering what's going on. Just like we have a lot of forms to come into the monastery, but you might have in your home a place where you have a box or a table with a cloth and maybe a Dharma book or a candle or image of the Buddha, where you might use that as a place to focus on. You sit down, maybe look at the altar itself, maybe look at the wall next to it. It's just a way of training your mind. What are we doing there? As far as I'm concerned, and I've done a few different kinds of training. I did spend about 4 years in the Marine Corps learning how to kill people, and was kind of into that when I was like 18 years old. So I'm kind of into anything that shows up in front of me. And of course, that structure goes way back, and we just assume we need armies because we got to protect ourselves from what? From other organizations that have armies that want to control. So mainly what I've been talking about is the mundane path of how to do this, how to control this, how to protect that, how to paint something, how to protect it from decay, how to preserve something so that we can eat it 3 weeks from now. There's just so many different ways. I'm not going to go into these much anymore, other than to say the mundane practices are obvious. When we get closer and closer to a spiritual path where we're actually going to start training the mind fundamentally, then quite often what happens is people do what Trungpa Rinpoche pointed out as spiritual materialism. Simply put, using spiritual techniques, mind training techniques to get somewhere, to have some kind of a getting somewhere idea. And Buddhism is full of this. The paramitas, all the different provisional teachings that talk to us about the nature of the mind, the nature of confusion, the nature of clarity, the nature of nature, the nature of Buddha nature. And when it breaks down into various structures, levels, concepts, and ideas, which are explained everywhere. There's just so much. When I started studying this in the 60s, there wasn't much. Alan Watts was the authority. Alan Watts and W.Y. Evans Wentz, along with Edward Kanzi. And now, whole libraries full of books on the Dharma, and some pretty good ones, and some of them are a little bit spinning a little bit and trying to generate some kind of validity out of what they're saying. But this path, as I understand it, is something you have to see. This is a transcendental do-it-yourself. You're actually going to do your version of it, your kitchen, your extra roll of paper towels, your linoleum you're walking across, your feet. So there's a kind of ownership that's not exactly possession, but is that you're really close to the dependent origination that shows up as a hand. It's your hand. But we tend to ignore all of that and impute that there's some kind of world that this apparent being is in. Look closely at that. How do you do that? Minimal. radical. Sit down, hold still, and watch the movement. Some teachers teach generating things, and I'm not against that. That has its value also. Creation, completion practices of the Tibetans. It's interesting that there are so many people that are very reasonable people. What did that one guy say? There's good people on both sides. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I would say it differently. There isn't anything but good people, but some of them are extremely confused. So there is no evil. You might want to use that word for a while, but I wouldn't overdo that. Use it as an index, but not as a judgment. This doesn't mean don't hold people responsible for what they're doing, not going the other way and saying everything is perfect. It is perfect, but not relatively perfect. It's ultimately perfect. And if you're hooked on relativity or right and wrong, should and shouldn't, life and death, that's the big one. That's the one, that's the real stumbling block. If you think you're going to die and you think you're actually alive, which then you think you're going to die. But those are not two different things. Separated, but not fundamentally separate. It has to be seen. You have to see it yourself. So we have to start somewhere. So the way I see it from having done this for a while is start at the surface, and it's not some surface, it's the surface, your own surface. Sit down and hold still and watch what you cannot cause, shall we say, or prevent from moving. And by holding everything that you can hold still without any movement particularly, and without any particular struggle, like trying to hold still based on somebody's standing over you with a ship bay or a Japanese battering ram. But just sit down, hold still, and go. Just because you only sit for 20 minutes a day and someone else sits for 20, 30 hours a week doesn't mean they're ahead of you. That's a misunderstanding. It's ahead, behind, and it's promoted by more ancient approaches to the teachings that talk more about gradation and getting better and improving and so on. So deeper training seems to involve looking more and more deeply into whatever is arising and the space within which it is arising or occurring, and seeing the spaciousness around the phenomena, thoughts, emotions, memories, conclusions, imputations, exclusions, validations, all of those Asians, coming and going, they're right, it's wrong, it's good, it shouldn't be, it should be. It feels really good. I feel really good that it's really a good meditation, really a bad. If you come to me and say, I'm having a really good meditation, I'm not impressed. I'm not saying I want you to be miserable. It's just that conclusions about meditation that's all they are. They're just abandoning what is occurring for what you think about it. Don't abandon what occurs for something else. And I say don't come to conclusions, which I do say that, but you might have to watch the way you keep concluding stuff and notice what is it that is fundamentally there? What is fundamentally happening? Train your mind. And how do you do that? See how untrained and how wild and crazy or loop-de-loop or whatever is happening in your mind stream that is. Not only on the cushion, but post-meditation also. But it's only about observing. Don't try to, if you're listening to me, then you could consider it and do whatever you want. Of course, you know that. But don't try to train your mind off the cushion to be different or be better or be more peaceful or be. This doesn't mean that you couldn't see that what somebody is doing and that is offending you or irritating you, and keep it to a minimum. Don't respond. Drop your gaze slightly. Don't drop it all the way down. You don't have to get credit for being humble. but you could drop it slightly. And you never have to do that. You might do it once and never do it again. So it's not an ongoing protocol to somehow manipulate people into thinking you're a nice person or whatever, or manipulating yourself into thinking, well, at least I'm not fighting with them. Be very, and when I say careful, tentative. Be very tentative in any area where you're abandoning what shows up for what you think about it, where you're abandoning what shows up for what does that mean? We often say that to ourselves. Anything occurs, the radical quality of just receiving what happens, we leave that for what we think about what just happened. Our conclusion, well, what does that mean? What does that lead to? This is the very nature of materialism, any kind of materialism. And some of those materialisms, like how to eat with a spoon, are necessary. So the interesting thing about this, we use the word progress on the path, when you make progress on the path, there are less and less and less reference points. Especially the ones that are saying, I think I'm doing pretty good. I think I'm not doing so good. Like Trungpa Rinpoche says, we mentioned last week, talked about, you don't get rid of ego, you just keep looking at it and looking at it. You wear it out because you don't resole it, you don't refurbish it, you don't rebuild it, you just wear it out. And I don't know if it could be said that you actually wear it out so much as you continue to look at that situation and see that it's coming apart, And we tend to panic when we start to lose the reference points, that the stitching and the sole and the leather, however you want to use the image, starts to come up and be more and more transparent, translucent, It's difficult. It's difficult, especially when we see that it's not actually a depth so much. That's a relative thing. So it's not a deeper training particularly. It's something is happening there, but it's more like it's something that's more difficult to describe without describing it in a way that is conclusive. That's why you hear words like suchness and Tathagata Garbha. We go into words that, even people who speak Sanskrit don't really understand what that is, because of it branches out in so many different directions. Tatata, thusness, or what was it? Thusness. What is thusness? Thisness, thusness, thatness, the-ness. Some way to take language and shape it in such a way that it actually goes into an area that tells us what this is ultimately. If you see ultimacy, you don't see anything. If you understand ultimacy, nothing happens. I'm not being silly here. I'm not saying that things don't happen, but they're happening relatively. This gets its meaning from when it's not happening, when it's over here on the Copacabana. See 3 smiles. So 3 people know what Copacabana means. So it's the contrast that does this. And this is why I say, when you sit down and watch the mind, just look at the contrast. No matter what shows up, no matter how many dragons, no matter how many angels, don't differentiate who you are, what this actually, what these human beings, these apparent human beings actually aren't even human. This is temporary. Even in my case, which is the temporary part is coming true. Because this is why it's so important to deepen that. And for each person, that's going to be different. Some people are just going to meditate a little bit and meditate a lot. Maybe meditate with a teacher, without a teacher, with a community, without a community, with a particular teaching. Maybe with this teaching, not that teaching, with this teacher, not that teacher. That's up to you. That's up to you and your particular what karma, the causes and conditions that arise as your clarity and as your confusion. I understand this, but I don't get that. This makes sense. That makes sense to me. Was it talked out deeper? What? Deeper something.
Depth of training.
Depth of training. Let's go back to that. So the actual depth of training won't seem like relative depth. We might look at it and we might even kind of back up a little bit because we're not getting the kind of signals from that normally you get from a depth charge. You don't get much from it because there seems to be less and less rather than deeper and deeper. Deeper and deeper is just a metaphor for what we're doing. There's no depth to it. I think I said something yesterday about just look at the surface. Want to see how deep that is? Stop looking for something else like depth. What you're looking for is right in front of you all the time. There isn't anything but the Buddha. There isn't anything but this. If you think there's something else, you'll spin and you'll take other people in that trajectory with you. It's interesting to look at part of where this particular topic came from, and not that I'm able to elaborate too much in this because I don't usually talk too much about social situation or world situation, a little bit. But you can be very, very clear socially and very, very respectful of others and very kind and very much all about other, even if you're a white guy, white person, you're all about being really supportive of everyone, of black people, brown people, poor people, maybe not so delighted with billionaires. That seems like somebody's misunderstanding something there. But you can be that and still not have a trained mind. If you still have a reactive mind that wants success and doesn't want failure, and usually that particular mind stream is tied up with right and wrong, good and down, good and bad, up and down, back, good and evil, and you can't push that away. You can't get rid of it. You can see it. You can see how that shows up and what the causes and conditions are behind that, 3 or 4 inches back, not 1,500 years, but because that's where it's coming from. That's even shallow. 1,500 years is nothing. That's something we can count. So we might have people who are pretty much into power and control and making money. Usually they're of one particular, you want to call it a political stripe or whatever. I'm not into doing that particularly, but something like that socially shows up, and we tend to break off into factions of right and wrong, up and down, back and forth. And very rare to meet someone who is actually training their mind and is on a spiritual path. Unusual. Even some people that are claim to be on a spiritual path. Very, very unusual to be able to have a conversation with that person that basically is respectful and considerate of the dependent origination that is occurring. It's actually a non-occurrence, but it looks like it's occurring. And to really be respectful of everything. Not easy. Because there's no merit, there's no, as Trungpa Rinpoche said, as Buddha Dharma, awakened truth without any credentials. So you have no proof for it. If you have proof, that's fishy. You could say, I could say, I could say, well, isn't this proof? I'm this monk and I have this and we're in a monastery, and isn't this proof of something? No, it's not. It's just a form. If you don't understand what a form is, then you will, the attribution of one form's better than another, or one form means this, that form means this, and that form means that, when actually the form is just a form. Form doesn't abandon what it is. You do. If you think of yourself as separate from everything or separate from anything, you will abandon that in order to secure your self, who you think you are. So I don't know of a way, other than the traditional way of the spiritual path, is people eventually see that the relative approach just doesn't work, no matter who your doctor is, who your therapist is, who your psychiatrist is, what your activity is, how much golf you play, how much you run, how much you jog, how much exercise, how much yoga you do, how much meditation you do, how many hours you've actually studied under whomever, John Kabat-Zinn, Thich Nhat Hanh, Dalai Lama, His Holiness the 17th, anyone else, me, any other teacher. It looks that way to begin with, that you can get somewhere by doing some particular thing. Maybe. Each person has to do this themselves. Don't believe, you hear me say this over and over again, and I mean it. Don't believe a word I say. You can consider it. You can give me the benefit of the doubt. You should definitely ask questions. And I sometimes say the harder, the better. Drive me right out of here with your questions. Ask me questions that give me a splitting migraine. No, don't do that. That would be difficult.
Michael Bowie.
I'd be upset with you if you did that. Yes, go ahead.
Your talk this morning has brought up for me something your other teacher said, or one of your other teachers said. Falling apart, completely falling apart, always completely falling apart, nothing to do. What is falling apart and what is the nothing?
Okay, so the falling apart, that was Kobun Roshi, and he was translating the mantra in Gate Gate Paragate Parasamgate Bodhisattva, or gone, gone, gone beyond, gone completely beyond, so be it. His translation is falling apart, falling apart, falling apart, nothing to do. And then the further line on that was everything all at once. It's just a way of using that mantra, talking about that in such a way to express and to say that everything is dependent on everything, that there's no separate thing. So what is falling apart is your idea about not only about yourself, but about reality. From looking at it just falls apart. The whole thing but you can rebuild it. You can have little ideas and opinions and strategies that will keep that's leaking over there. So, well, that will be a good practice to make me more mindful. This is why it's so important to have a teacher, so that you don't get caught in some kind of ring of fire, spiritual materialism, because it looks like a straight line. It looks like you're actually going somewhere, and it's circular. There is nowhere to go. Falling apart, the structure of ego, the structure of the world, the believability of this, and our imputations, our ideas about it, not the world. The world isn't going anywhere. Well, yeah, but not in the way that we think. So falling apart, nothing to do is just saying that you don't have any, even if you got into this situation out of a vow, even the vow isn't there anymore. Everything all at once. There isn't any one to complete the whole thing. There isn't anything but the Buddha. And you actually see this. You don't become a kind of a special guy. You don't have, your earlobes don't get long and your eyes don't turn to aquamarine. It's very, very direct and simple. Falling apart. All of your ideas of the world, no longer that structure. You look at it, there isn't anything there anymore. It's apart. You can't find other, and you can't find this. You can't find this. You can't find that. Everywhere you look, to put it bluntly, everywhere you look, you see yourself. Well, you don't really see a self. We don't see something else. As I sometimes sell, and I don't mean to pick on elves, but elseness, the elvesness. Does that work better? No, that's confusing too. Okay, I take that back. The elseness, the otherness, empty of other is another way that has been said. And maybe they're talking about what I'm talking about, maybe not. I don't care. I'm not interested in finding something that will back this up. There isn't anything to back up. There's no back. There's no front. There's just this. You can see this. If this is looking at this, and if you understand what I'm saying, you can do this. But you won't do it as far as I know. I'm not saying there isn't a magic wand somewhere. Probably in a junk shop in Vermont. Maybe we should go look for that. Junchu,
Couple of questions from YouTube.
go ahead.
First from Shane in Virginia.
I don't want to listen to Shane. Go ahead. What's Shane's question? Come on, Shane. What is it?
For people who are, quote, set in their ways,
Like you, Shane?
does it make it more difficult for openness to occur?
Openness doesn't occur. Openness is always the case. It's the hope and fear that people have, the shutting down that closes it off. There isn't anything but openness. Openness is a relative statement about something that fundamentally isn't even open because there isn't anything for it to close. We talk about it as openness. We just talk about ourselves being more open. That's just bullshit. I'm not saying it shouldn't show up some way, relationship-wise, possibly some description, but people tend to hang on to that and then try to get themselves to be more open or get somebody else to be, or use that. You should be more open. Why are you more open? The very best thing that you can do, Shane, or anybody, or I can do, or anybody can do is train your mind to see clearly so you don't get what this is from anybody else. You might need somebody to point. You might need the teacher to point. You might need the Sangha to point. You might need the teachings, the ultimate teachings, the provisional teachings, or something might need to say, you need to look here. And that's why we have a wall. Sit down, hold still, minimal. Make it very, very minimal. Watch what moves until nothing moves, or just keep watching it more.
Question from Vishal's mom.
Wait. Vishal.
He's in San Jose.
Oh, Vishal. Is it your mom? So what's Vishal's mom's name?
I don't know.
So she's sitting there and saying, ask him this. What's your favorite color? Go ahead. I won't be disrespectful anymore. Go ahead, Vishal's mom.
Are people who are being living statues or living mannequins in the streets of Europe doing shikantaza?
I don't know. People are holding very still. I think you could have 15 people all doing something that looked like the same thing. And since the causes and conditions that arise as any given person's karma, just like 15 people all doing shikantaza in a zendo. One person is dealing with the actual raw, rough, ragged edges around the condensation coming out of fear of a self, someone who can get somewhere. And someone else is just coming apart, falling apart. That person might have to fall apart for 20 or 30 years. So I would say, I don't know, but probably not. Just because even two people who are twins might look alike and so on, but they start to go off in different directions. Sometimes they deliberately get away from each other because they don't like looking in mirrors.
Her name is Anita.
Hey, Anita, how's it going? Has anybody else heard about those statues in Europe? Yeah. How many are there?
A bunch.
How many is a bunch? Like a
Variable.
quatrain, huh?
Yeah.
Variable number. Don, darn it, Don. So yes.
When you're bowing, you said you spent 4 years in the Marine Corps learning how to kill people.
Yes.
What are we learning on the spiritual path? What are we training for?
We are studying, we're learning. If it's the Buddhist path, we are learning to see what is fundamentally true. And it seems to fall in line with what the Buddha taught 2,500 years ago. Everything is dependently risen. There's no separate beings anywhere. Yes.
When you're bowing, is it possible then on the spiritual path that we could learn to kill people?
Probably. I don't know if it would be a spiritual path. I mean, someone could use that. And there's different, the thing that when Trungpa Rinpoche was training, for 20 years, I was a Dorje Kasam or a Vajra guard. I did not like that. but I did it because my teacher thought I should do it. So I did, but I did not like it because I don't like any of that military stuff. And I came out of 4 years in the Marine Corps, and 10 years later got involved in that. But I never had a chance to talk to him about it. I thought it was not a good idea to show up as some kind of military situation. Not good. Not good. But then again, I didn't talk to him about it. So maybe he thought, well, look at it this way. I doubt if he was interested in what I had to say about it. But I did it, and I limited my time. I'm going to do it for so long, and then I'm not going to do it anymore. So I need to know what it is that he's saying, because it's about awareness, not about right and wrong, up and down, back and forth, control and no control. Yes.
And sometimes you say you may have to kill somebody.
Yeah.
So how does that fit with the spiritual path?
I'm just saying that you don't know what you're going to, you could, that can show up lots of ways. I'm not saying that you're necessarily going to pull out a gun and shoot somebody, but maybe the causes and conditions that come together are really intense. So it could be if somebody comes busting into your house and you're trying to protect yourself and your family or something, and they come in and they have a gun, and you wrestle with them and you take the gun away from them, and the gun goes off and they die. You just killed somebody because there was no opportunity to say, can't we do this some other way? You could also be going to the grocery store and be distracted by something, or by your dog in the back seat or your child, and look around and somebody walks in front of you and you run over them. You just killed someone. So we are not in control of this. We have some control, but it's not a hell of a lot. Anything. Death comes without warning. Our own death comes, the death of someone else. So it's good to be as respectful as possible of that situation. More?
In your mind, is there a way on the spiritual path to prepare for those types of situations that may seem like accidents?
Yeah, train your mind so that whatever occurs, you don't agree, passion, you don't disagree, aggression, and you don't turn away, ignorance. Those are a simple way of talking about it. And depending on the causes and conditions that arise as your conditioning, how you feel, how people treated you when you were in the 4th grade, or any other time, or how your parents treated you, or how a coworker or a former mate, or the mate you have today. Those are dependently arisen. There's it's an incredible illusion that there are actual personalities that are giving you difficulty, or another personality that is giving you support. Those are dependently arisen. Nobody gets to the blame or credit for anything, but everyone is responsible. When I say responsible, it's not that you're to blame, but you need to respond to everything that is happening. Don't miss anything if you can help it. This doesn't mean lock down on anything. A lot of room for questions in that area. I'm quite happy in open space, even though it's not particularly open. Go ahead.
You mentioned training off the cushion or not training off the cushion. It seems like that shows up for me a lot. Is there anything I can do with that to work with it in support of my mind training?
So it will, if you're doing a lot of sitting practice, which I know you do a lot, you're doing 20 hours a week anyway, maybe more, somewhere in that area. And that's sitting down, looking at the wall. Maybe some of it is sutra chanting, I don't know, but somewhere in that area. That's a lot. That's more than most people are doing. Your average Cocoa Puffs bear is not doing that. But even that's no guarantee. You can't really look for, is this working? That's why the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha, the teaching person, what is being taught, everything is dependent. There isn't nothing coming from its own side. Everything is in a state of distress, and everything is impermanent. All compounded things will vanish, and there is no solid being there. There's no self in the skandhas: form, feeling, perception, concept, consciousness. There's no solid being. There's something, but it's not a solid being. Feeling might be there, concept might be there, but there's also a kitchen table across the room, just a different frequency of the same thing. Manifestation. So going back to your question, I would say, yes, just observe. Insofar as you can, don't push on anything, don't pull on anything, and don't shut down. But don't make it such a macho thing that it comes into some kind of control of cause and effect where you see you're getting ahead because you're more in control. You're finally find a way to deal with the negativity that arises that tamps it down, or some kind of a gaining idea happening. More? Good question.
Yuhong bowing.
Go ahead, Yuhong. Go ahead, Yuhong.
Yuhong bowing. Death comes without warning. When you mention that you need to be respectful, what does respect here include? Bowing.
Yeah, very simple. Just, it's not anything fancy. It's just watch what moves and respect. Have some, when I say respect, I'm not saying obey anything, but watch what's moving, either the emotions, the feelings, the memories happening in your own mind. Make friends with yourself. Allow the negativity to rise in your own mind stream, and allow the negativity to rise in your family and your son, Abraham. Watch his, rather than try to control him or make him into somebody else, be respectful of him. This doesn't mean let him break out all the windows in the house. It doesn't mean that, but it means make it a very tentative relationship that you have that is very respectful of his particular distress or suffering. What is he? Isn't he 4 years old? Yeah.
Yuhong bowing. Turning for Tuesday, we had a celebration just now. Yuhong bowing.
Tell him I said happy birthday. Further questions? Shoto.
Shoto bowing. When I think of training conventionally, there's this quality of having a little sample, like for baseball, I might practice my pitch or practice swinging my bat and then apply that later, like kind of put all those practices together. Okay. Is there a similar thing going on with mind training?
You know, it's taught different ways. There's a little bit, if you're listening to me, then I would say probably not. Not because you get to talk to me all the time for a while, or however long it may be, until you keel over. It's possible, even though you're only, what, 25 or 28? How old are you?
30.
30, oh, phew. Hey, Saturn cycle. So a little bit silly, but I'm just saying that you don't have to apply anything. Just observe. Just observe. Now, other kinds of training are different, and other teachers teach differently. And if you study teach the 7 points of mind training, I mean, it's 59 slogans, and some of them are extremely powerful ways of working with the mind, just as a slogan, as a reminding you. And then others are just kind of convoluted and complicated and involve, you know, more complicated practices and so on. Not here to promote that or to shut it down, but I think less is better. And those were also written back, you know, close to 1,000 years ago. So there is a different society, a different culture than we have today. So some slogans are good. My favorite one is don't do anything unless you have to. That's not him, is it? Isn't that something I said? Yeah, I don't know where I heard it at, but it seemed like a good idea. Choo-choo.
A question from Michael Worthington.
Yes, Michael.
How do you not lock down on past events to bring us to this moment?
Just watch the locking down. Don't fight with anything. And you might have to do that for days, weeks. You might have to do it the rest of your life. Fight nothing. It's the warfare and the intense grasping at a result or being someone else. Anything that happens in your mind stream, including yours, Michael, is dependently risen. You're not causing. You're not to blame for it. You don't get credit for it going away. You don't get the blame for it hanging around. It is dependently risen. It's a whole lot of other things, apparent others, that are causing this situation. And actually the difference between other and this, there's not two. This is why the teaching of the Yogacara teaching of perception only, or consciousness only. Just the consciousness, just the consciousness. So just watch what comes and goes. No particular evaluation. If there's some kind of a desire to improve or get better, then I'm not saying you can't have some relative improvement, but it's also, it's just like you've left the world and you've stepped up on the top of a mesa, and you're just going to wander around there and say, oh, this is better. You're actually missing your life. When you fall off the mesa or when you die, you're coming right back into dependent origination and all of the karma. And am I condemning you to something? No, I don't know what's going to happen. You know, what you're doing might be relatively might be better than what I'm talking about. I have no idea. But it seems like less is better. Don't do anything unless you have to. And this way, the very thing that shows up in front of you, you're actually looking at it with your awareness. If you're doing some mind training, if you're spending some time sitting down, holding still, and looking at the wall. So in other words, you're sharpening that which sees, or you could say witnesses. That way, whatever shows up in your life, you don't immediately operate out of hope that it's something you've been looking for, or fear that it's something you don't want. Because if you're doing that, we're right back to little mini skirmishes of the ego with the rest of the world. I don't want this, I don't want that. That should be, this shouldn't be. Mundane path, even though you might be wearing a robe, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if you're wearing a robe or braksu, or if you're the king of the hill. Still, if you're tied into relative truth by not really seeing what relativity is, it's what? Dependently arisen.
A question from Semi in Portland.
Mm-hmm.
Is it accurate to describe everything as existing on a spectrum in keeping with not separateness?
I wouldn't bother. When I say I wouldn't bother, I mean, you could if you want to, but putting everything on a spectrum, it puts us into a kind of a realm where we're, get to control things. We see it on a spectrum. So instead of actually seeing the raw and rugged edges of whatever that situation is that's showing up in our mind stream, instead we have a way of stepping away from it and seeing it a little bit more abstractly or conceptually. This is what philosophers, this is what Nietzsche did, this is what Kierkegaard did, this is what writers do this also. Create a world, and then that's the world. They're using the building blocks of relative truth. And how do they do that? They see them as blocks. Are they blocks? No, they're not. Are they not blocks? They're neither blocks nor are they not blocks. Who's that guy on that other screen over there? There's more of a delay over there. That's why I'm feeling delayed. Further questions?
You said when you look at others, yourself, there's no separation. Does that mean that try to understand in their shoes, in their circumstances? What does that really mean?
Maybe a little bit of that, walk a mile in my moccasins kind of thing. So maybe a little bit of that, but that's more of a relative kind of thing. Like, I'm doing pretty good, but I'm going to imagine what it's like to live your miserable life. Yeah. Yeah, that would be terrible. I feel really sorry for you. We're not talking about pity. We're not talking about feeling sorry for somebody. We're not even talking about compassion. Compassion has no compassionator. Compassion is not an emotion. If you think it's an emotion, then it kind of goes down into the feeling sympathy or feeling the relative kind of stuff where we haven't done anything. We just, I'm really sorry to hear that. It's not that you shouldn't have that. We have it all the time. Everybody has it. It's not wrong, but it's not compassion. So just insofar as you can, insofar as you can, just watch what comes and goes in the mind stream without grasping, without rejecting, and without shutting down. And the process of doing that is watching, seeing, witnessing, being with how much you grasp, how much you shut down, how much we push and put to actually see the mechanics of the ego mind, of the self-centered mind, of the hope and fear mind. So all I do is I say, don't do anything unless you have to. And immediately or slowly, you start to see that there's things I'm doing. I really wouldn't have to do that, but I'm doing them anyway. So why am I doing that? You could look at it. You might continue to do it and not know why you're doing it. So it's not about doing something right. doing something else. It's a very sneaky area of the way consciousness works, and we'll take any kind of breadcrumbs as a self to prove there's somebody here that's succeeding, somebody that's failing, or somebody that's not quite clear about things. Take no position, but observe the way dependently arisen, you tend to fall into some kind of positionality of right, wrong, up and down and back and forth. That may never change. If you see what this is, you don't have to be somebody else. You actually get to live your life. You don't miss your life. You get to be genuine. There's a question at the bottom, but I can't see it.
Sokuzan bowing, I'll read them for you.
Thank you.
Hakuran bowing, question for Sokuzan. The very desire to free ourselves from samsara is the desire to, quote, get somewhere. If I drop the desire, I am not motivated to sit. Isn't meditation the path to dissolving karma? But then isn't that getting somewhere?
I know that feels like a straight line, but I'm saying you don't have to drop anything. You just came up with that idea. I'm supposedly your Dharma teacher. I never told you to drop desire. Did I? Did I ever say, Rushin, you're just going to have to quit wanting other stuff? Straighten up. No, it is about awareness. It's about seeing it. And you may, if you start to look at what is moving, you may get an even stronger dose of it. But you might have to do a lot of it. You have to do a lot of it. This isn't just going to be dumped on you. And if it is dumped on you, then that's your path. You're in the dumped path. I sometimes say, how do you think I feel? Not because I feel so terrible. I feel okay. But it was not by training my mind to get better and better and more enlightened and more awake, more and more. There's a person here, there's an old man, of course, who's still alive, but not exactly healthy. But there's no real concern about anything other than this. There's just this. So there's no, I didn't suddenly get a credential, so suddenly I could get to be a Dharma teacher.
Was that Hakuran or
Rushin? I thought it was Rushin. I might have did it. Was that Rushin or was that Hakuran?
Sokuzan bowing, that was Hakuran.
Oh. Well, if it's Hakuran, then don't worry about it.
Sokuzan bowing, there are 2 more questions on Zoom.
Okay.
Jeanette asks, who is watching? Bowing.
Who is watching? I don't know who's asking the question. I'll tell you.
Jeanette bowing.
Jeanette? Is this Jeanette? Is this Daniel's friend or wife?
Sokuzan bowing, yes, bowing.
There's just an observing going on because if you have eyes, you have tongue, nose, body, mind. So there's just a receiving is happening because the consciousness has been downloaded, to put it in contemporary words, into a physical form. In my case, a long time ago. And so but the who, the part, that's imputed. We actually invent that based on a protective attitude towards the body to make sure we're safe and make sure we get food. And that over time starts with a little tiny person, eventually starts to feel like somebody who wants something else, desire, somebody who doesn't want that, desire to get away from that. But there's no actual person. It's an astonishing realization. If you realize this, you realize nothing is threatened, that who you are can't die, because who you are has never come into existence. You're just a passenger on a non-existent train. The passenger is completely real and is not separate from anything. And so you get your confidence, because the confidence is unconditional, because it doesn't matter what happens to you. In this case, all your students can run away. They're just gone. You can get ill and die. I'm not saying that you will enjoy suffering or pain or arthritis or a heart attack or migraines, of course, but it's just pain. Very simple. nerve endings. But who you are, who your fundamental identity can't be found. It can't even be located. So that's why it's very unusual for a human being or any being to realize their true nature while they're still a living being. Everybody, when you die, you immediately see what that is. But then you don't have the logarithm to handle the whole thing. So then you go back into the soup. Whereas in Jeanette, I think you're probably going to become an angel, though I've been hearing about you. I got your number. Further questions?
So Grand Bowing, a final question on Zoom from Laura in Traverse City.
Laura.
What is compassion? Bowing.
Compassion is a way of talking about wisdom that can have an emotional dynamic to it because we're still a human form here. But it's just not separating from anything, not going away to see when someone is separating them from you, separating from the Buddha, separating into congealing into some kind of a being who is taking their nerve endings really personal, and you see that's happening, then you feel you would like to help them, but you can't do it without their permission. Their karma may not be such that they'll even hear what you're saying. You see, maybe the only thing you can say is, "I'm sorry to see that you're having such a rough time." You may break down and weep with them. You may not. You may look at them and say, "Straighten up." You may walk away and from the way it appears to others, may be ignoring them. Other people may think because you see what this is fundamentally. You see what it is fundamentally. There isn't anything else but this, and you see it. So therefore, if any kind of relative action of somebody walking around or being kind to this person or being ignoring this person, that happens out of dependent origination. You are no longer, there is no boss. There is no authority. If you think there is, then you'll feel like sometimes you're right, sometimes you're wrong, sometimes you can follow this person, sometimes you can't. But if you realize what this is, the word that's been used down through the centuries is you're liberated. And what are you liberated? You're liberated from the illusion of being someone, of being separate being, or being put upon, or being threatened. Nothing is threatened. But when people think they're threatened, and we see that, then as Avalokiteshvara, when she looked down from her perch in the Dharmakaya and saw the suffering of the world, her name, I think, is Sound Observer, Avalokita. Kuan Yin, Chenrezig looked and saw and started to weep. Tears of white Tara over here, this shrine or this altar, and green Tara came out. Just a way of talking about it to help give people some kind of a structure that is not theistic, but operates in terms of deity. Your own mind, wisdom mind, can be worked with in the form that is called deity yoga, or not, or you can just, whatever shows up, meet it where it's at. Don't object to it. Don't agree with it. Don't look away. You may be flooded with feelings. That weeping you saw me do, that's not, I'm not acting. I'm not an actor. If I were an actor, I would be in France back in the 1940s. My name would be Francois Tome. Sorry for that kind of humor, but I don't know what else to do. Further question? Further question on Daniel Staffler says, smiling. Good idea. Whew. I'm always worried about getting a question from Daniel, because I know Daniel knows way more than I do. I mean, what if he asked me one of the really intense tantric questions? Then I'd have to, well, Daniel, that's not really important. I'll think of something to escape. Yes.
So correct.
Go ahead, Don.
How do we explore the texture of the surface without falling into the depth?
Just watch yourself fall. Maintain nothing. Don't, I mean, we do a little maintenance. We come in, we sit down, and in here, we're in the Zendo, sit down, face the wall, bow to the Zafu, turn around, bow to the Sangha, sit down, spin around, face the wall, hold still, but no maintenance. No maintenance. So it's just a touch and go. So you just sit down, and you're probably going to sit right there. I mean, why would you leave?
I don't know, nowhere else to go.
That's right. We have the doors locked. We forgot to tell, I locked these monks in. So that's the only way you can train the monks. So it's very simple. So you may get up, you may move here, you may fall into a labyrinth of some kind. You personally, someone else may not. This is why I say don't do book study together, study the Dharma, study the Lankavatara Sutras, the Sambhina Nirvana Sutra, and whatever works of Dogen Zenji, study what I say, the teaching I present, but don't necessarily discuss what's happening in deeper levels of consciousness with the rest of the Sangha, unless you can't help it. If you can't help it, you can't help it. So in other words, it's very easy for the Sangha to get kind of gossipy. Not a good idea. Any further questions?
So Grand Bowing. Final question in the chat box.
Thank you.
From Sue O. She asks, is, quote, nothing but the Buddha, quote, a term for nothing but consciousness? Bowing.
If we need to say something, then yes. The Buddha means awake. The personhood of the Buddha, of course, means Siddhartha Gautama, which was a person who lived 2,500 years ago, as far as we know. But the Buddha nature is awakened nature. Nothing sleeps. Nothing sleeps. So, yes, consciousness only. But even that is extra. Junshu.
A question from Emmanuel Lopez.
Emmanuel Lopez.
When I am with people in social gatherings and outings with friends, my ability to observe decays. How can I avoid this decay?
Don't have to avoid. You don't have to avoid it. Just notice it decays. That's awareness. You don't have to have awareness out of particular idealistic kind of things, like when somebody holds their hand like this, or if someone starts to do this. You don't have to. There's no instruction. Be very aware of everything. No, be aware of it decaying. That's a powerful awareness. That's beginning to show you the very structure of ego. If you look at ego, it starts to decay. Don't give yourself a credential or a demerit or any, don't add, don't subtract, don't divide, do no math at all. Except for, there's a couple of things you can add up, but most things don't add. Don't do anything with it. And I'm not giving you a credential particularly, but I'm saying there's nothing to maintain. You don't have to maintain if you're maintaining your awareness, this is a form of materialism. If somebody's doing that and practicing that way, I'm not against that. They should go ahead and do it, do whatever they want to do, especially if they have a teacher that's telling them to do that. They're giving them techniques or their awareness won't decay. I'm not going to do that. I want you to see, I don't want your awareness to decay, but I want you to see what is occurring. And if your assumption that your awareness is decaying, look closely and see, is that really true? How can your awareness decay? Isn't that what he said? His awareness was decaying? Yeah. How can your awareness decay if the very thing you're talking about, you're very aware of? Isn't that called transcendental dyslexia? I'm trying to get an answer out of Junju, but her lips are sealed. I thought that she was maybe what do they call that?
Channeling?
Huh?
Channeling.
Channeling, you know, no, you're not channeling. Are there any other questions?
Kevin Bowing.
Yes, Kevin.
Earlier, you mentioned that by not taking a position ahead of time, that was the only way we could take a position. What does that mean, Bowing?
How does it look to you?
I guess what I get from it is that by not coming in with a lot of preconceptions, I'm able to take whatever, I guess it's another way, maybe another way of saying don't do anything unless you have to, that the positionality that I do come to is out of awareness rather than a policy. Bowing.
Sounds good. Is there another question in the chat box? Take another one.
Soka Bowing. It was a reply from Daniel that said, "Thanks for pointing. Very much thanks." Bowing.
Very much welcome. Thanks for seeing that. And should we close? I don't know what to do next. What do you guys think? You guys had enough? Everybody's going like this, so I guess I get the message. These guys want out of here. Unlock the doors.
Into all places, so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha's way. Jiho san shi shiku, shi samu san, moko jahuromi. The 10 directions, the 3 worlds, all Buddhas, all venerable ones, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, the great Prajna Paramita. O Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions and the 3 times, please hear us. Please come down out of the light and protect Sokokoji Buddhist Temple Monastery, our Sangha, families, friends, and visitors. Heal everyone who is unhappy, sick, or suffering, and fill them with light.